What happens when a pilot, blinded by prejudice, humiliates a teenage passenger in front of an entire airport? He's about to find out. He thinks he's protecting a millionaire's jet, but he just made the fatal mistake of ordering the owner off her own plane. The karma that hits him is so swift, so precise, it will change his life forever. The air at Teterboro Executive Airport in New Jersey didn't just smell like jet fuel. It smelled like money. It was a crisp, clear morning, and the tarmac was a glistening parking lot for the global elite. Gulfstreams and bombardiers were lined up like expensive taxis, their mirror-finish fuselages reflecting the sharp November sky. Inside the Signature Ascent Aviation FBO, the private terminal, the atmosphere was one of hushed, polished efficiency. The leather chairs were impossibly deep, the coffee was complimentary single origin, and the silence was broken only by the quiet murmur of stock tickers on muted flat screens. Into this world of quiet power walked Serafina Sarah Hayes. To the casual observer, she was invisible. At 19, she was dressed in what could only be described as finals week chic. A worn-out NYU hoodie, charcoal joggers, scuffed combat boots, and a pair of high-end headphones dangling around her neck. Her hair was pulled back in a simple, elegant twist. Under her arm, she carried not a briefcase, but a beat-up leather satchel overflowing with notebooks and a tablet. She had just pulled up in a standard Uber, a beige Toyota Camry that looked utterly out of place next to the waiting fleet of black Escalades and Maybachs. Sarah was exhausted. Her eyes were puffy, not from lack of sleep, though there was that, but from grief. It had been exactly 1 month since her father, the brilliant, enigmatic David Hayes, had died in a sudden car crash. In an instant, Sarah had gone from being a promising, slightly nerdy engineering student to being the sole heir and new, unannounced CEO of Hayes Innovations, a multi-billion-dollar tech and aerospace conglomerate. This flight was her first official act. She was flying to Los Angeles for an emergency board meeting. The vultures were circling, and a rival CEO was already making moves for a hostile takeover, assuming the company was now a rudderless ship. Sarah had to get there, walk into that boardroom, and prove she was her father's daughter. She checked her phone. A text from Arthur Vance, her father's COO, and her new, reluctant guardian in all things corporate. N9009 Heshe is fueled and waiting. Godspeed, Sarah. Your father would be so proud. Sarah took a deep breath, shouldered her bag, and pushed open the glass door to the tarmac. The jet, N999HA, was magnificent. It was the company's flagship, a brand new Gulfstream G700, its pearlescent white paint gleaming. It was the jet her father had personally designed the interior for. Waiting at the base of the air stairs was the flight crew. 2 flight attendants, one older and stern-looking, the other younger with a warm, nervous smile, and the pilot. He was Captain Marcus Rourke. A man in his late 50s, Rourke was the physical embodiment of authority. His silver-streaked hair was impeccably coiffed, his uniform was starched to a razor's edge, and the gold stripes on his epaulets seemed to shine with self-importance. Rourke was a 25-year veteran of the private skies. He had flown politicians, movie stars, and titans of industry. He prided himself on running a tight ship, and his core belief was that standards, his standards, were all that kept the world from chaos. He watched Sarah approach from the terminal. He saw the Uber, he saw the hoodie, he saw the scuffed boots, and his face, which had been set in a mask of professional politeness, tightened into a barely perceptible sneer. He took one look at this young, black woman walking confidently toward his $75 million aircraft and made a calculation, and he calculated wrong. As Sarah reached the red carpet at the base of the stairs, Captain Rourke stepped directly into her path, holding up a hand like a traffic cop. "Hold on," he said, his voice a low, commanding baritone. "Can I help you, miss?" Sarah, surprised, pulled off her headphones. "Oh, sorry. I'm Serafina Hayes. I'm the passenger." Rourke's eyes did a slow, insulting scan from her boots to her face. "No, you're not." Sarah blinked. "I'm sorry?" "This aircraft is N9 SHA, a private charter for Miss Hayes of Hayes Innovations," Rourke stated, as if speaking to a child. "This is a restricted area. The commercial terminal is on the other side of the airport. You're very lost." The two flight attendants shifted. The younger one, Chloe, started to step forward, but the older one, Brenda, put a warning hand on her arm. Sarah felt a flash of annoyance, but brushed it aside. She was tired and didn't have time for this. "No, you misunderstand. I am Serafina Hayes. This is my flight." Captain Rourke actually laughed. It was a short, sharp, barking sound that held no humor. "Nice try, kid. I don't know what kind of stunt you're pulling, or if this is some kind of college prank, but I am the captain of this aircraft. This isn't a bus stop. You don't just wander onto a G700. Now, I'm going to ask you one time to return to the terminal before I call security." The humiliation was instant and hot. Sarah could feel the eyes of the FBO staff through the glass. A few ramp agents, loading bags onto a nearby jet, had stopped to watch. "This is ridiculous," Sarah said, her voice dropping the student-like tone and taking on a cold edge that would have been familiar to her father. "My name is Serafina Hayes. My COO, Arthur Vance, chartered this flight. You can check your manifest." "I have," Rourke shot back, his arrogance inflating. "It lists Ms. Hayes. I'm expecting a CEO, not this." He waved a dismissive hand at her entire person. "Now, I am responsible for the safety and security of this multi-million-dollar asset. You are a security risk. Get off the tarmac." "I am not a risk. I own this asset," Sarah shot back, her voice rising. This was the final straw for Rourke. He saw her anger not as righteous indignation, but as the aggression of someone caught in a lie. "That's it," he snapped. He unclipped the radio from his shoulder. "Teterboro Security. This is Captain Rourke of November 9er, 19er, Hotel Alpha. I have an unauthorized individual on the ramp, attempting to breach my aircraft. She is non-compliant and claiming to be the owner. I need assistance immediately." "Captain, wait," the younger flight attendant, Chloe, said, her voice trembling. "Maybe we should just check her ID." Rourke glared at her. "Stay out of this, Chloe. I'm handling it." Sarah stood, rooted to the spot, shaking with a mixture of rage and sheer disbelief. She hadn't even had time to process her father's death, and now she was being treated like a criminal on the steps of her own plane. "You are making a catastrophic mistake," Sarah said, her voice dangerously quiet. "The only mistake," Rourke replied, as two uniformed security guards jogged toward them across the tarmac. "Was you thinking you could pull this off?" The two airport security guards, one a portly older man named Sal, and the other a young, rigid-looking man named Jenkins, arrived at the scene. They immediately deferred to the man in the crisp uniform. "Captain Rourke? What's the problem here?" Sal asked, his hand resting on his belt. "This young woman," Rourke said, pointing at Sarah as if she were a piece of trash. "She breached the tarmac and is attempting to board my aircraft under a false identity. She claims to be Serafina Hayes, the CEO of Hayes Innovations." He said the name with exaggerated air quotes. Sal and Jenkins turned to Sarah. She looked like a kid, a college kid, in a hoodie. They shared a look. "Mum," Sal said, his tone tired. "You can't be out here. This is a restricted area. You need to come with us back to the terminal." Sarah felt a desperate, hot wave of panic. This wasn't just about her pride anymore. The board meeting in Los Angeles was in 6 hours. If she wasn't there, if she missed this flight, the narrative of her being an unstable, grieving child would be cemented. The company her father built would be carved up by men like Peter Harrison, their chief rival at Aerodyne. "Please," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. She fumbled for her satchel and pulled out her wallet. "Here, look. This is my driver's license. Serafina Hayes. This is my university ID. This is my new Hayes Innovations corporate ID. It just says CEO. She held them out. Rourke didn't even glance at them. He scoffed. "And I'm supposed to believe those are real? A 19-year-old CEO? In a hoodie? Fake IDs are a dime a dozen. Jenkins, get her out of here." The younger guard, Jenkins, stepped forward and took Sarah by the elbow. "Ma'am, you need to come with us. Now." The touch was electric. Sarah snatched her arm away. "Don't touch me. I am not a criminal. I am the passenger for this flight." Her reaction only confirmed Rourke's suspicions. He saw defiance, not desperation. "You see? Non-compliant. She's probably high or trying to film some idiotic TikTok prank. Get her out of here before I have her arrested for trespassing." "A prank?" Sarah was incredulous. "I'm trying to get to my my board meeting. If you would just call someone. Call Arthur Vance. He's the COO of Hayes Innovations. He's in LA. He's expecting me." This only made Rourke more smug. "Oh, Arthur Vance now, is it? Dropping big names. You're really committing to the bit, aren't you? Sal, I'm done with this. This is my aircraft. She is a threat. Remove her." Sal sighed. "Kid, just come on. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." As this drama unfolded, another passenger stepped out of a nearby Escalade. It was Peter Harrison, the shark-like CEO of Aerodyne. He was in his 60s, impeccably dressed, and he recognized the Hayes Innovations Ju 700. He watched with keen, predatory interest as a young, disheveled black woman was denied entry. He saw Rourke, a pilot he vaguely recognized as one of Air Exec's, the charter management company, top captains, standing firm. Harrison smirked. He'd heard rumors that David Hayes's daughter was a reclusive, artsy kid. He hadn't realized she was this. "She's trying to get on the company jet and can't even get past the pilot," he thought, amused. "This takeover is going to be easier than I thought." He made a mental note to call his broker. The senior flight attendant, Brenda, stepped forward, her face a mask of cold agreement. "Captain, we're going to miss our slot. The passenger needs to be removed." Chloe, the younger attendant, looked physically ill. "Captain, please, maybe just look at the ID. It only takes a second." "One more word out of you, Chloe, and you'll be writing reports for a month," Rourke snapped. His authority challenged, he was now doubling down. "I am the pilot in command. My word is law on this tarmac. Security. Do your job." Jenkins, eager to impress the captain, grabbed Sarah's arm again, this time much rougher. "Let's go, ma'am." Sarah, outnumbered and humiliated, felt tears of pure, unadulterated rage sting her eyes. She refused to let them fall. She looked past the guards, past the smirking Peter Harrison, and stared directly at Captain Marcus Rourke. The coldness in her gaze was absolute. It was the look of a person engraving a face into their memory. "You will live to regret this," she said, her voice so low it was almost a whisper. "You have no idea what you've just done." "Is that a threat?" Rourke spat back. "Add that to the report. Get her out of here." Sarah didn't resist this time. She let the two guards, Sal and Jenkins, escort her back across the tarmac, through the glass doors, and back into the sterile luxury of the FBO terminal. They deposited her on one of the plush leather chairs like a piece of lost luggage. "Stay here," Jenkins ordered. "We're going to run your ID. If it's a fake, you're in real trouble." Sarah didn't even look at him. She just sat there, her hands clenched into fists, her satchel in her lap. She watched through the window as Captain Rourke did a final, self-satisfied adjustment of his tie, barked an order at Chloe, and ascended the stairs into her plane. The heavy door was sealed with a pneumatic hiss. She was alone, stranded, humiliated, and the clock was ticking. For a full minute, Serafina Hayes did not move. She sat on the ridiculously comfortable sofa, a captive in a cage of beige leather and polished wood. The FBO staff studiously avoided looking at her. She was now a pariah, the crazy girl who tried to steal a jet. She could feel the adrenaline fading, replaced by a cold, sharp fury that cut through her grief like a diamond. Her father had always told her, "Don't get mad, Sarah. Get strategic." She was done being mad. She pulled her phone from her pocket. Her hands were trembling, but her fingers were precise. She ignored the texts from her friends back at NYU. She ignored the alerts from her class schedule. She went straight to her favorites and pressed the top name, Arthur Vance. He picked up on the first ring. He was in the 40th floor boardroom of the Hayes Innovations Tower in Los Angeles, pacing in front of a floor-to-ceiling window, a pre-meeting coffee in hand. "Sarah, thank God. Are you in the air? The board is starting to arrive. Peter Harrison is already here, looking smug." Sarah's voice was tight, thin. "Arthur, I'm not on the plane." Arthur stopped pacing, the coffee cup in his hand stilled. "What? What do you mean? Did you miss the car?" "No, Arthur. I'm at Teterboro. I'm in the FBO. The pilot, he wouldn't let me on." The silence on the other end of the line was so sudden, so profound, Sarah thought the call might have dropped. "Arthur? Are you there?" What?" Arthur's voice was barely a whisper. "The pilot. A Captain Marcus Rourke. He said I was a security risk. He said I was impersonating Ms. Hayes. He thought I was a prankster, or something else." The tremor in her voice was back. "He wouldn't look at my ID, Arthur. He just looked at me. He had security drag me off the tarmac, in front of everyone." For the second time in as many minutes, there was a deafening silence. Arthur Vance was a kind man, a gentle, grandfatherly figure who had been David Hayes's most loyal friend and advisor for 30 years. He had taught Sarah how to ride a bike. He had helped her with her calculus homework. He was a man of spreadsheets, gentle advice, and quiet strength. The man who spoke next was not that man. When Arthur's voice returned, it was unrecognizable. It was a flat, cold, lethally quiet monotone that chilled Sarah to the bone. A voice he reserved for obliterating hostile lawyers and gutting disloyal VPs. "Serafina," he said, and the name was a razor. "Give me the pilot's name again." "Rourke, Captain Marcus Rourke." "And the FBO?" "Signature Ascent Aviation." "Stay exactly where you are," Arthur commanded. "Do not speak to anyone. Do not move. I am handling this. You will be on that plane in 10 minutes. The line clicked dead. Back in the LA boardroom, Arthur Vance turned to his executive assistant. "Janet, get me Alan Murphy on his cell, now." Alan Murphy was the president of Air Exec, the charter management company that handled the Hayes corporate fleet. The board members, including a preening Peter Harrison, watched as Arthur, his face a mask of thunder, stepped into a private, glass-walled office. "Alan!" Arthur barked, the second the call connected. "This is Arthur Vance. I have a code red situation at Teterboro." "Arthur, what's wrong? Is the G700 okay?" "The G100 is fine. The captain you put on it is the problem. His name is Marcus Rourke. He has just ejected Serafina Hayes from her own aircraft." The string of expletives that came from Alan Murphy's end was impressive. "He what?" "Arthur, that's impossible. Rourke is my best. He's just old school, but he's a professional." "He's a bigot is what he is," Arthur snapped. "He profiled the 19-year-old daughter of the man who signs his paycheck and threw her off the tarmac like a trespasser. She is sitting in the FBO right now while he's probably sipping coffee in the cockpit, proud of himself. This is not a request, Alan. This is a directive from your single largest client. You are going to fix this. Now." "What? What do you want me to do?" Alan stammered, his mind racing. "I want you to patch me through to the sat phone in that cockpit. I want to talk to Captain Rourke personally. And Alan, while I'm doing that, you'd better be finding a new pilot for the return trip, because Rourke's career is over. Am I clear? Crystal, Arthur. Crystal. Patching you through, now." Inside the cockpit of the G700, Captain Marcus Rourke was in his element. He was seated in the left-hand seat, the world his for the taking. The glowing instrumentation of the $75 million jet hummed around him. His co-pilot, a younger man named Mark, was running the final pre-flight checklist. The flight attendant, Brenda, entered the cockpit. "Captain," Brenda said, her voice full of fawning respect. "Good call back there. You handled that perfectly. Can't be too careful these days. That girl was clearly trouble." Rourke permitted himself a small, satisfied smile. "That's why we're here, Brenda. To maintain standards. To separate the professionals from the rabble." "Well, the rabble has been removed," Brenda said with a thin smile. "Coffee?" "Please," Rourke said, settling into his seat. As Brenda turned to leave, a high-pitched, insistent beep filled the cockpit. It was the satellite phone. Rourke frowned. It was rare to get a call on the sat phone before takeoff. It was usually reserved for in-flight emergencies or high-level client communication. He picked up the receiver. "Cockpit, this is Captain Rourke." A voice, as cold and clear as the stratosphere, came through the line. "Captain, this is Arthur Vance, COO of Hayes Innovations." Rourke sat bolt upright. The Arthur Vance. He cleared his throat, his posture becoming even more rigid. "Mr. Vance, sir. An honor. We're just completing our pre-flight. We had a slight delay, a minor security issue, but it's been handled. We'll be in the air in 10 minutes. "A security issue?" Arthur's voice was dangerously neutral. "Tell me about it." Rourke felt a swell of pride. Here was his chance to show the new leadership how competent he was. "Yes, sir. You wouldn't believe it. We had a young woman, a trespasser, on the ramp. She was trying to board the aircraft, claiming she was Ms. Hayes." "Oh, and what did this trespasser look like, Captain?" This was it. Rourke leaned back, painting the picture. "Well, sir, you'd have been appalled. She was a kid, maybe 19 or 20, black, dressed in a hoodie and torn-up clothes, carrying a skateboard or something. Clearly not our clientele. She was belligerent, defiant, dropping your name, in fact. I did what any captain would do. I refused her access and had Teterboro security remove her from the tarmac. The situation is resolved, sir. You don't need to worry." The silence that followed stretched for 5 seconds, then 10. Rourke's smile began to falter. The co-pilot, Mark, sensing the shift in atmosphere, stopped his checklist. "Captain Rourke," Arthur's voice was now a low, shaking growl. "You absolute, credentialed, arrogant fool." Rourke's blood turned to ice water. "Sir, the kid you just ejected from her own aircraft is Serafina Hayes. The hoodie and torn-up clothes you found so offensive belong to the sole owner of Hayes Innovations. The woman you just humiliated in front of an entire terminal is your ultimate employer, and the only passenger for this flight. The color drained from Marcus Rourke's face. His entire world tilted. He looked at his co-pilot, who was staring at him with wide, horrified eyes. He could hear Brenda in the galley, clinking a coffee cup. I... Rourke stammered, his mind short-circuiting. Sir, she had no ID. She had a wallet full of identification, you arrogant bastard. Arthur Vance roared through the receiver, all pretense of calm gone. You just didn't bother to look, did you? You saw a black teenager, and you decided she didn't belong. You decided your standards were more important than your manifest. Mr. Vance, please, it was an honest mistake. I was protecting the asset. You weren't protecting the asset, you were protecting your own pathetic prejudices. You are currently sitting in her G1100, a jet her late father, David Hayes, personally commissioned. You are occupying her left-hand seat, and you just threw her off of it. Rourke was hyperventilating. Please, sir, what can I do? Here is exactly what you are going to do, Arthur commanded, his voice dropping back to that terrifying, icy monotone. You are going to power down the engines. You are going to unseal that door. You are going to walk your uniformed self down those stairs, across the tarmac, and into that FBO. You are going to find Ms. Seraphina Hayes. You are going to beg for her forgiveness. And you are going to escort her back to her aircraft with the dignity you should have shown her in the first place. Yes, sir. Right away, sir. And Captain? Yes, sir. When you land this aircraft in Los Angeles, you will be met by me, a representative from Air Exec Human Resources, and our head of corporate legal. Your employment is terminated. Enjoy your last flight with Hayes Innovations. I hope it's a memorable one. The line clicked dead. Captain Rourke sat there, the receiver still pressed to his ear. His entire future had just evaporated in a 90-second phone call. Mark, he whispered, his voice trembling, kill the APU. We're opening the door. The sudden whine of the G700's auxiliary power unit, spooling down, was an unnatural silence. In the galley, Brenda, who had been preparing the captain's coffee, nearly dropped the carafe. What's going on? The cockpit door slid open. Captain Rourke emerged, but he was a changed man. The proud, authoritative officer who had boarded 10 minutes ago was gone. In his place was a pale, sweating, hollow-eyed shell. His face was the color of old parchment. Brenda, Chloe, he said, his voice cracking. Open the main door. Now. What? But we're about to taxi, Brenda stammered. Open the door! Rourke roared, a desperate, broken sound. Chloe, seeing the raw panic in his eyes, leaped to the door and began the unsealing procedure. The heavy door hissed and slowly lowered, the air stairs extending once again to the red carpet on the tarmac. Captain, what is it? Chloe asked, her voice small. Rourke just stared at her, his eyes unfocused. The girl. The kid, he mumbled. She was Miss Hayes. Brenda's hand flew to her mouth, her face instantly pale with terror. Chloe just felt a wave of sickening vindication. Oh my God, Chloe whispered. What did you do? Rourke didn't answer. He just stumbled past them and began his descent down the stairs. Each step felt like it was encased in lead. The tarmac, which he had commanded so easily moments before, now felt like a vast, hostile desert. He could feel the eyes on him, the ramp agents, the pilots in other cockpits. And, as he approached the terminal, he saw Peter Harrison, the Aerodyne CEO, still lingering by his car, now watching this new development with a look of utter, predatory confusion. Rourke pushed through the glass doors. The FBO was silent. The two security guards, Sal and Jenkins, who had been chatting by the desk, snapped to attention. And there she was, sitting on the sofa, exactly where they had left her. Serafina Hayes wasn't looking at her phone. She wasn't crying. She was just watching him. Her expression was perfectly, terrifyingly neutral. She had heard the engines power down. She had known he was coming. Captain Marcus Rourke, a man who had never begged for anything in his life, walked the longest 20 yards of his career. He stopped a few feet in front of her, his captain's hat now crushed in his trembling hands. The security guards were baffled. "Captain, is there another problem?" Sal asked. Rourke couldn't speak. He just licked his dry lips and tried to form words. Sarah spoke first. Her voice was cold and clear, and it cut through the quiet terminal. "Did you just get a phone call, Captain Rourke?" He flinched as if she had struck him. Miss Hayes," he choked out. There has been a misunderstanding," Sarah offered, her voice devoid of emotion. "A mistake? I am so sorry," he stammered. I didn't know. I had no idea. Please, Miss Hayes, your aircraft it's ready for you." Sarah looked at him. She saw the pathetic, crumbling ruin of a man who, 10 minutes ago, had been a god on his small patch of concrete. She saw the terror in his eyes. She saw the end of his career, and she felt nothing. Just a vast, cold emptiness. "You didn't know what, Captain?" she asked, standing up. She slung her leather satchel over her shoulder. "That I was a person, or that I was a person who mattered?" He had no answer. He just stood there, drowning in his own humiliation. "You're right about one thing," Sarah said, walking past him, deliberately brushing his shoulder. "It is my aircraft, and I'm late for my meeting." She walked straight past him, out the glass doors. Rourke, after a frozen, agonizing moment, turned and followed her, a disgraced servant following his queen. The security guards, Sal and Jenkins, watched in open-mouthed horror. "Sal," Jenkins whispered. Did he just kick the owner off the plane?" Sal just shook his head. "Kid, you and we're going to be writing reports till Christmas." Peter Harrison, watching from his car, felt his blood run cold. The grieving, unstable child was that? The girl who had just summoned a 25-year veteran pilot from his cockpit with a single phone call? The girl who was now striding onto the G700 with the pilot, trailing her like a beaten dog? His smirk was gone. His hostile takeover plans suddenly seemed very, very complicated. The atmosphere inside the Gulfstream G700 was colder than the air at 40,000 feet. As Sarah boarded, Chloe was standing just inside the door, her face pale and her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and apology. "Miss Hayes," she said, her voice trembling. I am so sorry. I didn't." Sarah stopped and looked at the young flight attendant. She saw genuine remorse, not the panicked self-preservation she saw on Rourke. "What's your name?" "Chloe, ma'am. Chloe Jensen." "Thank you, Chloe," Sarah said quietly. "Your professionalism is noted. I'd like a bottle of water and then to be left alone to work. Please." Chloe nodded, her relief palpable. "Of course, Miss Hayes. Right away." Sarah turned her attention to the other flight attendant. Brenda was nowhere to be seen. She had, upon seeing Rourke's return, promptly locked herself in the aft galley, claiming a sudden and violent migraine. Sarah walked down the plush-carpeted aisle of the cabin, her father's cabin. The buttery leather seats, the polished mahogany, the custom tech embedded in the walls. It all felt alien. She sat down at the large conference table, pulled out her laptop and tablet, and set her satchel on the floor. She did not look back. In the cockpit, The tension was a physical thing. Captain Rourke strapped himself into the left-hand seat, his hands shaking so violently he could barely grip the yoke. His co-pilot Mark refused to look at him. Mark had heard Arthur Vance's end of the conversation. He knew Rourke was a dead man flying. "Checklist," Rourke croaked. "Pre-flight checklist. Complete," Mark said, his voice clipped. Get clearance from the tower," Rourke stammered. Mark keyed the mic. "Teterboro ground, 9019er, Hotel Alpha. Ready for taxi. Runway 19er. The plane began to move. For Captain Marcus Rourke, it was the beginning of a 5-hour funeral procession. Every chime from the cabin, every request from air traffic control, every normal, routine part of his job felt like a nail in his coffin. He was a good pilot. He knew that. He was one of the best. He could fly this jet in his sleep. But his mind wasn't on the crosswinds or the fuel consumption. It was on the 19-year-old girl sitting in the cabin behind him. It was on the words, "employment terminated." He'd lost it all. His 6-figure salary, his prestige, his house, his boat, his kids' college tuition, all because why? Because he couldn't stomach the sight of a black kid in a hoodie on his pristine jet? He tried to justify it. It was a security protocol. Her appearance was unprofessional. She was belligerent. But the excuses rang hollow, even in his own mind. He hadn't checked her ID. He hadn't made a call. He had just judged, and he had delivered his own sentence. About 2 hours into the flight, Chloe quietly entered the cabin and approached Sarah. "Ms. Hayes, I just wanted to apologize again. What you saw, that's not what this company is supposed to be about." Sarah looked up from her spreadsheet. She was deep in a financial analysis of Aerodyne's recent acquisitions. "It's not your fault, Chloe. You tried to intervene." I should have done more," Chloe said, twisting a napkin in her hands. "Captain Rourke, he's very old school. He's been with Air Exec for years. He always talks about maintaining the standard." "The standard?" Sarah repeated, her voice cold. "What standard is that, exactly? The one where you assume a person's net worth based on their skin color? The one where you treat people with disrespect because they don't look like you?" "No, ma'am. I guess. I don't know." Sarah sighed, softening slightly. "My father, David Hayes, started this company with $5,000 and a patent he drew on a napkin. He came from nothing. He wore hoodies and jeans to board meetings for 10 years because he said, 'The work matters, not the suit.' That pilot," she jerked her thumb toward the cockpit, "disrespected everything my father built. That is why he's being fired, not just because he insulted me." Chloe stared at her. He's being fired? He was fired before this plane ever left the ground, Chloe. Mr. Vance made that very clear." A small, shocked sound escaped Chloe's lips. It was real. The consequences were real. "Now," Sarah said, turning back to her screen, "I have a $20 billion company to save. Please, I need to work." "Yes, Ms. Hayes, of course." The remaining 3 hours of the flight passed in absolute, deafening silence, broken only by the hum of the engines and the occasional, shaky and strained announcements from Captain Rourke as they began their descent. "Cabin crew, please prepare for landing in Los Angeles." His voice was a ghost's. He was a man who had been forced to fly his own guillotine to the execution block. The G700 descended through the thin Los Angeles haze and touched down at the private aviation terminal at LAX. The landing was, technically, perfect. Marcus Rourke, even as a broken man, was a superb pilot, but the smoothness of the touchdown brought him no comfort. It was the end. He taxied the aircraft not to the standard FBO, but to a massive private hangar bearing the striking H logo of Hayes Innovations. As he guided the jet to a stop, his heart sank into his stomach. There, standing on the tarmac in the bright California sun, was a welcoming committee. At the center was Arthur Vance, his silver hair impeccable, his suit dark and severe. His hands were clasped behind his back, and his posture was that of a furious general. To his left stood a sharp-looking woman in a severe business suit, holding a leather portfolio. This was Janet, Arthur's EA, but more importantly, a top-level HR executive. To his right stood two men in equally expensive suits, both with the hard, emotionless faces of corporate lawyers, and parked about 50 yards away was another jet, an Aerodyne Global 7500. Peter Harrison, the rival CEO, had apparently just landed as well. He was standing by his own car, watching, his curiosity having clearly gotten the better of him. He wanted to see how this drama ended. "We are parked," Rourke whispered into the intercom. "Mark, shut down engine 2. Mark wordlessly began the shutdown sequence. Rourke took a deep, shuddering breath. He unbuckled his seatbelt, stood up, and for the last time put on his captain's hat. It felt impossibly heavy. He walked out of the cockpit. Brenda had miraculously recovered from her migraine and was standing by the door with Chloe, their faces pale. "Don't open it," Rourke said. "What?" Brenda asked. "Don't open the door, please. Just give me a minute." But it was too late. Sarah was already standing. She had packed her laptop. She slung her satchel over her shoulder. She walked to the door and looked at the 3 crew members. "Open it, Chloe." Chloe, her hand trembling, did as she was told. The door unsealed and the stairs descended. The fresh, warm air of Los Angeles flooded the cabin. Sarah walked to the top of the stairs and paused. Arthur Vance's grim expression softened for a fraction of a second as he looked at her. He saw not a child, but the new CEO. Sarah descended the stairs. Arthur stepped forward and put a protective arm around her shoulders. "Are you all right, Sarah?" "I'm fine, Arthur," she said, her voice strong. "I'm just angry, and I'm ready for this board meeting." "Good," Arthur said. "The car is waiting. Janet, take her to the tower. We'll be right behind you." Sarah nodded. She didn't look back at Rourke. She didn't need to. She walked past the legal team, got into the back of a waiting Audi A8, and the car sped away. Now, Arthur Vance was alone with his lawyers. He turned his full, undivided attention to the top of the air stairs, where Captain Rourke, Brenda, and Chloe stood, silhouetted against the dark cabin. "Captain Rourke, Brenda, Chloe, please disembark," Arthur called out, his voice echoing in the hangar. "Now." One by one they descended. Rourke was last. He walked like a man heading to his own execution. He stopped 5 feet in front of Arthur Vance. The silence was heavy. Peter Harrison, 50 yards away, was watching the entire scene with binoculars. "Captain Marcus Rourke," Arthur began, his voice flat and formal. "I am Arthur Vance, COO of Hayes Innovations, the parent company of Air Exec, your employer. As of this moment, 11:52 a.m. Pacific Time, your employment with Air Exec is terminated, effective immediately." Rourke flinched. The words, though expected, were still a physical blow. "Mr. Vance, please," he began, his voice pleading. "It was a mistake, a simple, honest mistake. I have a 25-year unblemished record. Her appearance, it was a security judgment call." Arthur took a step closer, his eyes narrowing to slits. "A judgment call? You looked at the 19-year-old daughter of the founder of this company, a young woman still in mourning, and you called her a trespasser. You refused to look at her ID. You publicly humiliated her. You delayed $1 billion board meeting. And you did it all because your judgment told you that a black woman in a hoodie couldn't possibly belong. No, it wasn't about race, Rourke stammered. Don't you dare lie to me, Arthur hissed. You're a pilot, Rourke. You're trained to check, double-check, and verify. You did none of those things. You just assumed, and you assumed wrong. Your 25-year record isn't unblemished. It just means you've been getting away with this arrogant, discriminatory behavior for 25 years. Well, the hard karma just hit, Captain. You just profiled the one person on Earth who could end your career with a single phone call. And she did. Rourke's face crumpled. My family, my mortgage, my pension. You should have thought of that, Arthur said, his voice void of all sympathy. You should have thought of that before you decided to play God on the tarmac. He then turned his icy gaze on the flight attendants. Brenda. Brenda jumped. Sir? You enabled him. You agreed with him. You failed to de-escalate. You failed your passenger. You are on indefinite suspension, without pay, pending a full investigation. I wouldn't hold your breath. Brenda let out a small sob. Finally, Arthur looked at Chloe. Chloe Jensen. You, at least, attempted to intervene. You will be fully interviewed by HR. Your testimony will be very important. For now, you are on paid administrative leave. We will be in touch. Chloe just nodded, her eyes wide with terror. Now, Arthur said to all three of them. This is a private hangar. Your access badges are revoked. You will be escorted off the property by security. Your personal effects will be mailed to you. Get out of my sight. The two lawyers stepped forward as security guards emerged from the hangar office. Rourke, a completely broken man, dropped his captain's hat. He didn't even bend to pick it up. He just turned, and with Brenda sobbing behind him, was escorted away. Peter Harrison, watching through his binoculars, lowered them slowly. The smirking, predatory confidence was gone. He had just witnessed a summary execution, corporate style. The new kid running Hayes Innovations wasn't a kid at all. She was a killer. He turned to his own pilot. Get me back to New York, and cancel that call with my broker. We're not touching Hayes Innovations. Not now. Not ever. An hour later, Serafina Hayes walked into the 40th floor boardroom at Hayes Innovations. She had not changed her clothes. She still wore the NYU hoodie, the joggers, and the combat boots. But as she entered, the dozen or so grey-suited, middle-aged men who made up the board of directors fell silent. They had been whispering, wondering where Arthur was, why the meeting was delayed. Peter Harrison had, notably, already called in to regretfully withdraw his attendance. Sarah walked to the head of the table, the seat that had been her father's, and placed her tablet on the polished wood. Arthur Vance entered silently behind her and took his customary seat at her right hand. Good morning, gentlemen, Sarah said. Her voice didn't shake. It was as clear and strong as her father's. My apologies for the delay. I had to terminate a pilot for gross misconduct and a severe violation of our company's core principles. The board was stunned. This was not the grieving, lost little girl they had been expecting. Sarah tapped her tablet, and the main screen lit up. It wasn't a financial projection. It was a single, simple sentence. The Hayes Principle. Dignity first. My father built this company on the idea that the best ideas can come from anyone, anywhere, regardless of what they look like or where they come from, Sarah said, her eyes sweeping the room, making contact with every single board member. Today, I was reminded that some of our employees have forgotten that. Captain Marcus Rourke was fired today not just for insulting me, but for insulting that core principle. She continued, "He saw a 19-year-old black woman and decided she was rabble. He didn't know she was the CEO. And you know what? It shouldn't matter. He shouldn't have treated anyone that way. Whether I was the CEO or a janitor, his behavior was unacceptable." She leaned forward. "So my first act as CEO is this. We are initiating a top-to-bottom review of all hiring and customer service protocols, starting with Air Exec and moving through every single division of Hayes Innovations. We will have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. This isn't just a legal matter. This is our new standard, the Hayes Principle. Dignity first. Are we clear?" The board members, who had come prepared to challenge a grieving child, found themselves facing a formidable leader. One by one, they nodded. "Yes, Ms. Hayes." "Good," Sarah said, and a small, sharp smile touched her lips. "Now, I believe Mr. Harrison of Aerodyne has withdrawn his hostile bid. Let's talk about why, and how we're going to use that momentum to acquire them instead. Arthur, please bring up the Q3 projections." For the next 2 hours, Serafina Hayes, in her father's hoodie, systematically and brilliantly dismantled every assumption they had ever had about her. She was her father's daughter, all right. She had his kindness, but she also had his steel. The fallout from that day on the tarmac was swift and brutal. Captain Marcus Rourke found that Arthur Vance was not bluffing. He was blacklisted. Air Exec, under direct orders from Hayes Innovations, shared the incident report, carefully vetted by legal, with their insurance underwriters and the FAA. Rourke's unblemished record was now permanently stained with a termination for gross misconduct and discrimination. No private charter company would touch him. The prestige he had built his entire identity around vanished overnight. He lost his house in the Hamptons. His wife left him. The hard karma hit back, not just at his career, but at the entire hollow life he had built on a foundation of arrogance. 8 months later, a pilot for a regional airline, flying short-haul routes out of Buffalo, swore he saw Rourke. He was in a different, ill-fitting uniform, no stripes on his shoulders, training for a first officer position on a tiny 30-seat turboprop. He was a man with haunted eyes, stripped of all his former glory. Brenda, the senior flight attendant, was formally fired 2 weeks after the incident, following the HR investigation. She tried to sue for wrongful termination, but the combined testimony of Chloe, the FBO staff, and the security guard's reports painted a damning picture of her complicity. She lost, and she never worked in aviation again. Chloe Jensen, however, was a different story. Sarah had been deeply impressed by her quiet courage. After her interview, she was not only cleared, but promoted. Sarah put her in charge of retraining the entire flight services division for the corporate fleet. Chloe, using her own experience, helped draft the Hayes Principle Training Manual, which became the new gold standard for corporate aviation. She became one of Sarah's most trusted travel aides. Peter Harrison and Aerodyne never recovered. The story of what happened on the tarmac spread through the industry like wildfire. Harrison's failed attempt to capitalize on David Hayes's death, followed by his cowardice when he saw the new CEO's power, made him look weak. His stock wavered. 6 months later, Hayes Innovations, led by Sarah, did exactly what she had proposed. They initiated a strategic acquisition, absorbing their rival and solidifying their place as the undisputed leader in aerospace. And Serafina Hayes, she never went back to being just a student. She finished her degree online, but her true education was in the boardroom and in the hangars. She led Hayes Innovations with a unique blend of her father's genius and her own quiet, unshakable sense of justice. 1 year later, she was on the G700, flying to a tech summit in Berlin. She was still wearing a hoodie, but this one was a new, clean one from her company's new R&D division. She was sketching a new hypersonic engine design in one of her old notebooks. The cabin door chimed, and Chloe entered, now the head of in-flight services, looking polished and confident. "Ms. Hayes?" Chloe smiled. "We'll be landing in Berlin in about an hour. Can I get you anything?" Sarah looked up from her sketch and smiled back. The coldness that had defined her a year ago was gone, replaced by the warm confidence of a true leader. "I'm fine, Chloe, thank you," she said, looking out the window at the curvature of the earth. "It's a beautiful view from up here, isn't it?" "Yes, Ma'am," Chloe said. "It certainly is." "By the way," Sarah said, tapping her pen, "tell the pilots I said hello, and remind them, dignity first." Chloe's smile widened. "They already know, Miss Hayes. They already know." That day on the tarmac, Captain Marcus Rourke thought he was in charge. He thought his uniform and his assumptions gave him power, but he learned a lesson that day that we all must remember. True power isn't in a title, and real authority isn't in a uniform. It's in your character. He judged Serafina by her hoodie and her skin color, and in doing so, he sealed his own fate. He was hit by the hardest karma possible. He lost his job, his prestige, and his future, all because he refused to see the person standing right in front of him. Serafina, on the other hand, took that humiliation and turned it into strength. She didn't just take over her father's company. She made it better, leading with the dignity and respect her pilot so desperately lacked. This is a real-life story of how prejudice is a disease and how karma is the only cure. What did you think of Captain Rourke's downfall? Was it justified? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you enjoyed this story of justice served, please hit that like button, share it with your friends, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more dramatic real-life stories where karma always gets the final word.